House of the Dragon, Episode 10, The Black Queen, the finale for Season 1. And guys, we had huge expectations, but the biggest question is, can the Game of Thrones prequel stick the landing after 9 fairly solid episodes? Some of which have even been compared to some of the better episodes in Game of Thrones. Can this finale leave us hyped for a potential 2-year-long night before we get to the Dance of the Dragons in Season 2? Well guys, Episode 10 is now one of the most controversial episodes in not only House of the Dragon, but even Game of Thrones. The anger on Twitter is legit. We have a lot to discuss, so let's get straight to it. But quickly, if you're new here and you enjoy what you see, please consider subscribing and throw a like on the video too. Episode 10 has 2 major talking points, with Aemond accidentally killing Luke and Daemon choking Rhaenyra. We get the infamous Storm's End scene. Luke has been sent by his mother to remind the Baratheons of their oath, but Aemond got there first. And I loved how you could see Vhagar towering in the background in the darkness as Luke arrives on a minuscule Arrax. And it plays out brilliantly with the Lord Baratheon telling Luke to bugger off back to his mother. And Aemond showing how unhinged he can be, where he tells Luke to cut out his eye for payment for what happened in Episode 7. It's a very tense scene, all building to the encounter in the storm in the sky. Luke races to Arrax to get the hell out of here, and the audience are searching for Aemond on Vhagar in the darkness. The chase scene almost gives a slasher horror vibe from Friday the 13th for Halloween. And then it concludes with a shocking twist. Arrax was terrified of Vhagar, so he disobeyed Luke. He blasts Vhagar in the face with some fire. Vhagar gets pissed and disobeys Aemond. Aemond is shocked because he lost control over his dragon, and now Arrax and Luke are dead. Of course, it's said in the books that Aemond killed him on purpose, but the show has played it off as an accident. And we know the show has made many changes so far, but of course you've got to remember that Fire and Blood is a biased report of several accounts. And the show makes it seem like Aemond just wanted to scare Luke, send him back to Dragonstone with his tail between his legs. I think Aemond knew that if he kills Luke there and then it starts a war, and he might be cruel but he's not an idiot. But yes, many are angered by this change. They feel that it makes Aemond soft and not a maniac like they believed. Well, I think the point is to remind us the dragons are not slaves to the Targaryens. Just like Viserys said, it's an illusion that they control them. Dragons might be bonded to one rider, but they are their own sentient being with their own feelings. And as we saw in Game of Thrones, Drogon disobeyed Daenerys several times. And it makes sense that Arrax would become so terrified he would react on his own, and Vhagar went in for the kill after being hit in the face with fire. It doesn't diminish the character of Aemond, because you know what the reports are going to say. Word is going to spread all over the Seven Kingdoms that he killed Luke on purpose. And this goes back to Episode 4, when Viserys talks about Rhaenyra sleeping with Daemon. It doesn't really matter what the truth is, all that matters is what people think. They're going to think that Aemond is guilty and a maniac. And I actually think Aemond is going to become rather traumatized by these events. He is now a kinslayer, and I think he's worried he might lose control over Vhagar again. And having the biggest dragon in the realm, that must be a scary thought. So I think this will lead to Aemond that we know from the books, the one running riot in the Riverlands. And that sapphire eye looked pretty sick. But as for Daemon is a difficult character. People loved him in the first few episodes where he done something epic every single week, and Matt Smith delivered a stellar performance. But we can't forget that Daemon is not a nice guy. He groomed Rhaenyra as a kid, killed his first wife, the list goes on, and now you're going to add domestic violence to his resume. But Daemon is not a villain either. We shouldn't cancel him because of this. He's a messed up dude who does love his family, but is also obsessed with Targaryen power and his legacy. He took command whilst Rhaenyra was in labour, and it kind of seems to me a lot of the lords are looking to him. They've crowned a queen, but they still see a male as the true power. And then Daemon is angry because Viserys never told him about the Song of Ice and Fire when he was the heir, and Rhaenyra is rubbing that in his face. And then on top of that, their daughter was just stillbirthed, and the premise of war is far approaching. Yet Rhaenyra is failing to be decisive, something which her father was criticised for. Guys, I'm not condoning what Daemon done, it's not cool, but nothing is ever straightforward in this series. Most characters fit into the grey character category, and Daemon Targaryen is a prime example. There's a reason why Sir Otto Hightower thinks that he is the most dangerous person to be near the Iron Throne. And if you think Daemon and Rhaenyra was going to be a straightforward, happy romance, then guys, you've got the wrong impression. But I'll tell you what, I did like how Jace thought he could tell Daemon what to do. But yeah, that's the two major controversies out the way. And this episode is a very busy one. Corlys Velaryon returns after discussing with his wife. They've decided to back Rhaenyra for the sake of Daemon's daughters and the boys, their grandchildren. And I would like it if Daemon would interact with his daughters a bit more. You kind of forget they're even his. And of course they cut out that scene where they hug after Laena's death, and that caused a massive uproar. And like I said, it's a very busy episode, but it belongs to Rhaenyra. Her stillbirth was horrible to watch, but so well performed. And her coronation was a major contrast to Aegon's, whose was a grand affair in the Dragon Pit, with all the Conqueror's heirlooms and a massive crowd. Whereas Rhaenyra's was smaller scale, but just as meaningful, with her father's crown, the symbol of a true heir, and the promise they all made all those years ago. And I appreciated how Rhaenyra was very hesitant to go to war, and she showed a cool head. Daemon's ready to go with fire and blood, but Rhaenyra knows if she disputes Aegon's coronation as king, this will lead to war, and thousands will die. For Daemon, it's simple, that's her birthright, Targaryens rule, whereas Rhaenyra knows what's happening. She knows that thousands will die for her, or against her. I'll tell you what guys, I did like how Otto turns up, and it's a reprise from episode 2. But this time, Syrax and Rhaenyra are not there to equal the odds against Daemon and Caraxes, but rather to remind Otto of her power. He tries to persuade Rhaenyra to give up her claim by reminding her that Alicent still loves her. I remember in the last episode, Alicent was the only one that didn't want to kill her former friend. And I think using that page from the books, you could say is rather cliche, but I think it was well done and a nice callback to a peaceful time. But guys, we've had a lot of dragons this week. Daemon uses Caraxes to remind the Kingsguard of what awaits if they betray Rhaenyra. And also we get to see Vermithor, the former dragon of King Jaehaerys. So he's a big boy, very old, very grumpy dragon. Daemon sings to him in the Dragonstone caves, and many people are saying, is this Daemon trying to claim another dragon? No guys, Daemon can't do that, he already has Caraxes. He can't claim a second dragon. What Daemon wants is to find the currently riderless dragons before the Greens can do what they've done with Vhagar. That includes Vermithor and Silverwing. And the wild dragons are mentioned as well, but that's a different kind of beast. But Daemon knows the Blacks need more dragons. Syrax has not been battle tested, and Arax and Vermax are babies. And the Greens have Vhagar, and Dreamfire is pretty powerful as well. And Sunfire might be younger, but he's no slouch. And many have argued that Jace and Luke should have tried to claim Vermithor and Silverwing instead of hatching new ones. In hindsight, that makes total sense, but of course you could argue that Rhaenyra wanted them to have their own dragons from birth, as is the tradition to place a dragon egg in the crypt of a new baby. And speaking of Arax, he is the first dragon to fall in this series. We barely knew him, but his death had a major impact on us, in terms of what's to come, but also it's just so brutal to watch a dragon die like that. I really don't want to think about a few years' time when the dragons are ripping each other apart. But yes, overall I would say this is a very solid episode, but you could argue it doesn't really feel like a season closer. More like an episode 9, with a huge dragon fight and an ending scene of Rhaenyra letting go of her restraint and ready to unleash fire and blood. I kind of feel like I'm waiting for next week to see the next episode, when news drops in King's Landing that Rhaenyra has declared herself queen and wants revenge for her son. But I think we're going to have to wait till 2024 for that and the start of the dance. And I know many are angry with Aemond and Daemon this week, and many have said this series is over for them, but I think they're exaggerating. I do think the later half of the season has shown this series does have issues, but I'm happy with where they are and the challenges they've faced, with all the time skips, the brand new characters, and the story they're trying to tell. But guys, I want you to post your thoughts on episode 10 and the first season as a whole. I don't think it's perfect, and there's a lot I would change, but it did bring back the passion I had for Game of Thrones. And I am excited for the next season, and hopefully more to come in the future. But I think that'll do it for this video, and the first season of House of the Dragon. Of course, we'll make more videos heading into season 2, opinions will change, and there'll be a lot to discuss. But for now, I'll say thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.